Remember the Nissan Almera? Hatchback from back in the 80s. I'm sure you do, not that you'd want to, it wasn't all that. Nissan killed it off and haven't made a mid-sized hatchback since, until now. This is its replacement, the Nissan Pulsar. So let's put this thing in perspective. It's going up against some heavy hitters. Ford Focus, Vauxhall Astra, Kia Ceed, Hyundai i30, so it's gotta be special. Unfortunately, it doesn't really look the part. Elements of the design in isolation look reasonably good. I really like that carbon fiber-esque rear splitter thing they got going on, plus some of the shapes on the wing mirrors are quite nice. But when you put it all together, this isn't really a car that stands out from the crowd. That's a big shame because Nissan have kind of made their name over the last few years by making really standout vehicles. The Nissan Qashqai kind of invented that whole crossover deal. The Nissan Note, a small car, but it stands out. Nothing else really looks like it thanks to that boxy shape. And the Nissan Juke, completely bonkers looking car, but I love it for that. The Pulsar, on the other hand, kind of looks like pretty much anything else on the road. Remove the Nissan badge, take off anything that identifies it as a Nissan, and this might as well be a Toyota. There are two engines at launch, both of which are the same as you'll find in the bigger Qashqai, a 1.2 litre petrol and a 1.5 litre diesel, and both are really efficient. The petrol will do 56.6 miles per gallon and the diesel a massive 78.5, and not many cars in this category can match that. Sadly, by emphasizing economy, fun has had to take a bit of a back seat. Right now, I happen to be in the petrol car. Performance is acceptable rather than stellar, so when you accelerate low in the rev range, you get a fairly decent amount of pickup, but the grunt runs out somewhere just above the 3,500 RPM mark. Beyond that, it gets kind of gutless, so overtaking requires a hell of a lot of planning in advance. The brakes are a little bit odd as well. I'm not sure whether that's because this car is brand new with pretty much 0 miles on the clock, but braking in this car is a little bit like braking in a PlayStation game. You never quite know exactly how much pressure you've applied or you need to apply in order to come to a stop smoothly. So right now, I'll try and slow down, and there's nothing, and then suddenly there's quite a big bite, and that takes a lot of speed off the car. You really need to kind of spend time with the vehicle in order to understand how much force you need to apply. It takes a little bit of getting used to. The steering feels pretty good though. Fairly direct, not too sporty, but responsive enough to give you the confidence you need when negotiating roads at low speed. At high speed, kind of a different story. You never quite know what the car's gonna do. That's not to say it's unpredictable, it's just that it doesn't really communicate what's going on at the wheels. Ride quality is a bit of a mixed bag. It's okay for the most part, but right now I'm driving on pretty smooth roads and you get a little bit of bounce. Nothing to really worry about, but it's not perfectly smooth as you might expect. On the whole, I'd say it's a pleasant car to drive. It won't set your pulse racing. Maybe you like that in a car. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit exciting at least some of the time, then you're probably better off looking elsewhere. What is exciting in a weird kind of way is the interior. It's very good in more ways than one. Not only does it look nice with a good blend of materials and textures, plus a well-conceived floating center console effect, but it's also really easy to use. In typical Nissan fashion, everything's well laid out, from the indicators and light switches, heated seating buttons, to the climate controls, to the excellent touchscreen infotainment system. Also, geeks will be happy to learn you can even perform Google searches and use Facebook. You can install other apps too, including iHeartRadio, Twitter, and more. It's also incredibly spacious. According to Nissan, it has the longest wheelbase in its class, and that means excellent legroom and headroom. Honestly, getting inside this car, it doesn't matter if the person in front is lanky as hell or obnoxious as hell and has slid their seat all the way back, you still get a ton of legroom. And as for headroom, even Marge Simpson could fit inside this thing. As for the boot, it's massive. 385 litres with the seats up, and that's more than you get in most of its rivals. The shape isn't especially clever, the loading bay isn't completely flat, and it's lacking in clever cubbyholes, but it is cavernous nonetheless. Ultimately, the Pulsar is a solid re-entry to the family hatchback market for Nissan. Competition is incredibly stiff in this market, so it's fair to say we expected a bit more from the car, especially in terms of how it looks and how involving it is to drive. But looks are subjective, and if all you care about is getting from A to B, then this won't be concerning in the slightest. It might not be the sexiest proposition, but as a practical family car that delivers excellent fuel economy, it's definitely worth considering. So it's a hell of a car on the road, but it's also a hell of a car when standing still. Just being in and around the Wraith is incredibly special.